It's kind of remarkable the lengths that other YouTubers have gone in trying to pretend that Palworld is some huge success. I've talked about this extensively, but Steam player counts are not a reliable metric for how relevant a game is. Okay, the official numbers released by Palworld are unrealistic. They can't be real. And more we're seeing signs that everything Pocket Pair has done is nothing more than a smokescreen. At this stage, I believe Palworld is a pump and dump scheme in which the leadership is going to jump to another company and just allow the company to take the fall for just everything they've done. And they've done quite a lot wrong over the past couple of years. I don't believe Palworld was ever intended to be a long-term viable product. I do think this is something that is just basically the video game equivalent of a crypto scam. If you look at what Pocket Pair has been doing ever since Palworld hit early access, none of it really makes any sense. They're not building their own cohesive brand. They're not really trying to develop an actual functioning video game. Their priority has always been to antagonize Nintendo fans and to try and rally people behind their Pokemon killer. Now, their Pokemon killer is doomed to fail and it's not going to go anywhere, but that's not the point. The idea is to gaslight companies like Tencent, like Sony, into investing in them to try and generate a profit based on this idea that they can hypothetically compete with Pokemon. They're not so much looking to produce a product as they are trying to lure in investors, trying to get people to invest in their company and in their brand to try and get the grift off the ground. Because this is a company that by no means can produce anything of value. Everything they do is ripped off from something else. And that's very apparent simply by looking at their output and everything they've been doing over the past couple of years. So what have they spent the past couple of years doing? Well, while their views and their player numbers were in the toilet, they were trying to hype up this idea that 1.0 would revolutionize Palworld, that it would be bigger than Pokemon, that it would outperform Pokemon, that they were more successful than Pokemon now. And that very obviously wasn't true right from the get-go, okay? I talked about this on my website. By the way, I fired up a new website, harmansmithbooks.com, in which I went over, like, Palworld's misrepresentation of their actual numbers. They say they have 40 million players and try and imply that that's the same thing as 40 million sales, but that simply isn't true. Like, the simple fact of the matter is Pokemon outperforms Palworld by having more actual players who put more money down on the product. You know, people don't understand this, but because Pokemon is releasing at full price, obviously Palworld would have to sell itself at sell twice as many units to keep up with Pokemon. So in reality, Scarlet and Violet sold like what, 30 million, I think, one of the best-selling Pokemon games ever. Palworld would have to sell 60 million units to make the same ROI, essentially. They would have to sell twice as much to get the same amount of money back. But when you look at the actual numbers, when you look at like how much Palworld has actually sold, you realize that it's not even selling 40 million units. It's not selling that well at all. In order to create the illusion that Palworld was outperforming Pokemon, Pocket Pair released Palworld for $30. They conflated their player count with their sales numbers, right? So people pay for the game on Steam and then share it with their friends, okay? That boosts the player numbers without really boosting the sales, okay? They have situations like people trying the game on Game Pass for a couple of minutes. That counts as a player, right? Like, players are not the same thing as sales. And I think this is what people don't understand, that, like, if you compared Pokemon players to Palworld players, the difference would be staggering. Okay. How many people play older Pokemon games or play stuff like Pokemon Go or like, even play like modern Pokemon? Like, you're talking about like probably hundreds of millions of people. Essentially, what we've been seeing with the Palworld situation, in which we're seeing people give all these big, impressive looking numbers, but don't really give the context for it, right? For example, right now we're told that Palworld is doing very, very well on Steam. It has like 900,000 players at once. It's supposed to be this big deal, but the simple fact of the matter is, Steam player counts are not an adequate representation of how popular a game is. Like, if you look at how much Pokemon sells day one, it is very easy to imagine that Pokemon surpasses Palworld's numbers pretty easily. And there's also the simple fact, which is indicated even by the Steam players charts, that the player count has halved since the early access days. Like, Palworld has not hit 1 million units since 1.0 came out. The game is already running out of steam. What seems to have happened, and I really do think this is true, is that Palworld wanted to break into the TCG market. They wanted to produce the Palworld TCG. And so they decided, okay, we're going to release Palworld 1.0 in July, about a month before the TCG launches, and use that as a burst of relevancy to get our game talked about and to hopefully sell a couple of cards, okay? Like, that was their mindset on this. Is that 1.0 wasn't really a game. It was a marketing tool to try and segue into like another thing, to try and break into the TCG market. And I immediately saw a lot of YouTubers try and say that Palworld was going to like be bigger than Pokemon's TCG, that it was going to be a huge hit, that they've already printed like 3.5 million cards or something. And like tried to make that sound like a huge success when, like, I don't know, Pokemon prints like 10 billion cards a year now. Honestly, like, Palworld has a long way to go before it would ever compete with Pokemon. And that's always been like my mindset when looking at this, right? It doesn't really matter how much money Palworld pulled in or how popular it was with certain demographics, because the long and short of it is, it wasn't sustainable. It wasn't going to stay relevant long term. And this was very evident by simply looking at the discourse around the game and the culture surrounding it. Because good luck finding anybody talking about this game at all who doesn't bring Pokemon into it. The only reason this game is discussed at all is to try and destroy Pokemon and to try and like weaponize it against Nintendo, to try and make Nintendo look bad. That is like the entire culture around the game summed up very easily, is that it's not actually an entertainment product. It's just something that people can weaponize against Nintendo and the Pokemon Company. To put it very simply, Palworld has no real identity of its own. The entire appeal of it is being some dark and edgy version of Pokemon for like internet tryhards. It has no real like gameplay loop. It's not involved. It's not like fun or interesting. All the people who have tried to say it's like, way more crazy and intense than modern Pokemon clearly hasn't like spent any amount of time with Pokemon at all. Like it's just very, very self-evident that like anybody shilling for this like doesn't understand what they're talking about. So what I think is going to happen in the next couple of months, first of all, the player counts are going to drop, okay? People are going to finish the game. There's not going to be a whole lot to do. You're going to see like a handful of people who are fully committed to playing the game, like continuing to play it for the next couple of months, and then it's going to trickle down to where it was before 1.0 came out, okay? The Palworld TCG is going to come out. a bunch of grifters are going to leap onto it, trying to make it the next big thing. It's not going to happen. Cards are not going to be valuable. They're not going to be in demand. Nobody's really going to care about them. And I think a lot of Pokemon TCG people are going to look at the artwork and start noticing that like how generic and basic it is compared to the Pokemon TCG. Because this is an issue that like a lot of people don't seem to understand, is that like the criticisms toward the Pokemon games exclusively revolve around the video games, okay? Like, it doesn't extend to the anime, it doesn't extend to the merchandise, it doesn't extend to the TCG, okay? The idea that Palworld is going to just beat the Pokemon TCG is insane. Like, especially considering like the Pokemon TCG is such a huge thing right now. Like, it is like in right now. People love Pokemon. So like the idea that Palworld could ever outperform it or like any of the other TCGs that are out there is just like insane and makes no sense. So like the Palworld TCG is going to flop. It's going to be a disaster. Stores, I imagine, are going to like stop stocking them very quickly. And then we're going to see a result of the lawsuit. And I think it's too early to say like where it's going to go, because I don't think it's going to be particularly favorable to either party. Because from what I imagine, what I'm seeing is that considering Sony's involvement in the Palworld case, I think it's very, very possible that Sony is going to leverage the courts to like rule in favor against Nintendo, even though Nintendo is completely in the right, and this really should never even gone to trial. Sony like could do that, but like Nintendo's completely in the right legally to take this shit down. So again, it could go either way. We'll have to wait and see. But like at this stage, I don't think it matters what the actual court result is, because the simple fact of the matter is that Palworld is not as a desirable product. It's not going to remain relevant long term. And it's only talked about because of its association with Pokemon, because of the obvious blatant plagiarism. And that's Palworld's entire legacy. Okay? Pokemon plagiarism. It doesn't really matter what the courts say or what happens after this. Like, it's just a simple fact that this is a knockoff brand and everyone can see it. You are, over the next several years, assuming this game isn't straight up shut down, is that you're going to see a slow, gradual decline in Palworld's relevancy. Nobody's going to care about any of the Palworld spin-off products. Nobody's going to care about any animated productions that get produced. No one's going to care about the merchandise or the TCG or the video game, right? What you're going to see is a complete and total drop-off because nobody cares about Palworld. This has been very obvious from the very beginning, but right now we're in this weird denial phase where people genuinely want to believe that Palworld is outselling Pokemon, or that it's bigger than Pokemon, or that it's more popular than Pokemon, and it simply isn't true. And honestly, I think after this entire situation, we really have to address the elephant in the room, is that Steam is not a relevant platform. Like 900,000 players on Steam is jack shit compared to the average Nintendo release. Like, that's just the reality of it. There are so many Nintendo games that I know have higher player bases than that, and yet like we're supposed to believe it's some like monumental milestone that like Nintendo could never top. It's just ridiculous, okay? Like, it is downright insane how we have to keep going through this song and dance where we have to keep pretending that Steam is some relevant thing. If Palworld is the best game on Steam, then Steam is the home of a plagiarized knockoff product, okay? It is cheap Walmart brand, GameStop tier bullshit. Okay. And I do think that's how we should view Steam going forward. They're not a video game production company. They are the equivalent of GameStop. They are not competing with Nintendo, Microsoft, or PlayStation. They are competing with GameStop, with Walmart, with retailers that sell video games. Okay. I don't know what's so difficult to understand about that. What video game developed by Valve have you bought? What hardware developed by Valve have you bought? And don't try and tell me that the Steam machine is going to take the world by storm, because it's not. Just look at the price point. Like, again, if Palworld is your big epic W for the year, you really need to sit down and think about your life. Okay. If this is the best thing you got, if this is going to be your big game of the year player, you really need to reevaluate your life going forward. Like, this is a complete joke. Steam is never going to become a thing.